I almost didn't notice it. That's the part that stays with me. If I had been a little more tired, a little less awake, if I had gone straight to bed instead of going to the kitchen for water at 1 a.m., I would have missed it entirely. I would have gone home the next morning and kissed Marcus goodbye and driven to work and had no idea that the life I thought I was living was not the life I was actually in. Or maybe, and this is the part I've turned over many times in the months since, maybe I would have noticed something else eventually. Maybe the gap had been there long enough that something would have slipped through it sooner or later. Maybe I would have caught a different small thing on a different ordinary night, and we would be telling a different version of this story with the same ending. I don't know. What I know is that it was a Tuesday night in October, and I was thirsty, and I went to get water. It was a hair tie. Purple. Fabric covered, the kind with a little gold seam running around the edge, sitting on the bathroom counter beside the soap dispenser, like it belonged there. I don't own purple hair ties. I never have. I have brown hair that I keep in a braid most days, and I use the same black elastic bands I buy in bulk from the drugstore. I have owned the same style of hair tie for 11 years. That purple hair tie was not mine. And Marcus, who I had been with for 2 years and 3 months, and who I trusted the way you trust something you have tested and found solid, did not have a sister, did not have a roommate, did not have a female friend who had ever, in 2 years and 3 months, come to his apartment. I stood in that bathroom at 1 a.m. holding a glass of water I had come to get because I was thirsty, and I looked at that purple hair tie, and something in my chest went very quiet. My name is Jenna Calloway. I'm 31 years old, and this is the story of the 3 weeks between finding that hair tie and finally understanding what it meant. Which was not, as it turned out, the thing I spent 3 weeks being afraid it was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what I found and what I did with it, I need to tell you who Marcus and I were. Not to make you like him or feel sorry for him, but because context is everything in a story like this, and I don't want to give you a villain before you've met the person. Marcus Webb is 34 years old. He's a project manager at a mid-size construction firm, the kind of man who is organized in the specific way that people who grew up in chaotic households become organized, deliberately, carefully, as a form of self-protection. His apartment reflected this. Everything had a place. The books were arranged not alphabetically but by frequency of use, which he had explained to me once with a seriousness that I had found both slightly absurd and genuinely endearing. The kitchen was immaculate. The bathroom counter held exactly 4 items: his toothbrush, a bar of soap, a bottle of face wash, and a small glass that held his razor. 5 items. The night I found the hair tie. We'd been together since I was 28. We met at a work conference. Not each other's company, an industry event where we'd been seated at the same dinner table by alphabetical assignment and had talked for 4 hours and exchanged numbers at the end of the evening and texted for 3 weeks before our first actual date. It was not a whirlwind. It was methodical and warm, and it felt from very early on like something that had been engineered to last. I want to be specific about why I trusted him, not because trust is unusual, but because the quality of a trust matters when it's tested. I trusted Marcus the way you trust something you have tested from multiple angles and found consistent. He had never once given me a reason for unease. In 2 years and 3 months, his behavior toward me had been, in the aggregate, the behavior of a person who was where he said he was and felt what he said he felt. He didn't perform. That was the word I would have used. He didn't perform being good to me the way some people perform goodness, with an audience in mind. He was just good to me in the ordinary, unremarkable ways that accumulate into something solid. He called when he said he would call. He remembered things, not big things, small things. The brand of coffee I liked, the name of my difficult coworker, the fact that I got headaches and barometric pressure changes and shouldn't make plans for the day after a storm. He paid attention in the specific way that people pay attention when they're genuinely interested, not when they're managing an impression. He had met my parents within the first 6 months. My mother liked him immediately, which she expressed by feeding him aggressively at every family dinner and asking him his opinion on things, a high honor in my mother's household. My father took longer, as my father takes longer with everything, but by the 1-year mark he was calling Marcus by his first name, without the slight stiffness that indicated reservation. I had met Marcus's mother twice and his father once. His parents had divorced when he was 12, and the geography of his family was complicated. His mother in Phoenix, his father in a small town in Oregon, a half-sister from his father's second marriage who was 16 and lived with her mother, and whom Marcus saw twice a year at holidays. He was close with his mother, less close with his father. The kind of family situation that is common enough that it requires no special explanation, just a certain amount of navigation. I tell you all of this because I want you to understand that when I found the purple hair tie, I was not someone who had been looking for evidence of something wrong. I was someone who had spent 2 years and 3 months building a picture of a person, and that picture had been, until 1 a.m., on a Tuesday in October, entirely consistent. I was not paranoid. I was not insecure. I was not the kind of person who checked phones or monitored whereabouts or went looking for cracks. I was just thirsty. I did not say anything that night. I put the glass of water on the counter. I picked up the hair tie, gently, the way you handle something you're not sure about, and I looked at it for a long moment. Then I set it back down in exactly the same position, and I went back to bed. Marcus was asleep. I lay beside him in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought, I am, by nature and by training, a person who thinks before she acts. I work in data analysis. I spend my days looking at information and asking what it actually means before I draw conclusions. I have learned, professionally, that the first explanation for an anomaly is rarely the correct one. That pattern recognition requires patience. That jumping to the nearest conclusion is the fastest way to be wrong. The nearest conclusion about the purple hair tie was obvious. It was the one my stomach had jumped to immediately in the bathroom, before my brain had engaged. I did not want to run toward that conclusion, not at 1 a.m., not without more information. So I thought about other explanations. Marcus had had a cleaner come through once, a service he'd used twice and then discontinued because he found it easier to clean himself. The cleaner was a woman. Could she have left it? Possible. But the appointment had been 3 months ago, and Marcus cleaned his bathroom every week. A hair tie left 3 months ago would not still be in pristine condition beside the soap. Could it belong to his half-sister? She was 16. She visited at holidays. Christmas was 2 months away. Also possible. Except his half-sister's last visit had been in December of the previous year, 10 months ago. And again, 3 months ago was already too long. 10 months was impossible. I went through every woman. Marcus knew. His mother visited once, 8 months ago. His colleague, Dana, who I had met at a work event and who was married, and whom Marcus had never mentioned in any context that suggested closeness. A neighbor named Mrs. Petrov, who was in her 70s and brought him soup when he was sick and whom I adored. None of them accounted for a fresh purple hair tie on a clean bathroom counter. By 2 a.m., I had exhausted every alternative explanation I could construct, which left me with the obvious one, sitting in the middle of my mind like something I couldn't move around. I fell asleep around 3. I woke up at 7 when Marcus's alarm went off. I watched him get up, make coffee, bring me a cup without being asked, sit on the edge of the bed and tell me about his day while I held the cup with both hands and looked at him. He looked entirely normal. He looked like Marcus. The same person who had remembered, unprompted, that I don't like the overhead light in the morning and had turned on. The small lamp on his side of the bed instead. The same person who laughed at things before they were finished, who couldn't watch sad movies without needing to talk through them afterward, who sent me an article about an obscure accounting software glitch once because he knew it would make me laugh even though it was a Tuesday and there was no occasion. That was the specific cruelty of it. He looked exactly like himself, and I didn't know, looking at him, whether that was evidence that I was wrong or evidence that I didn't know him, as well as I thought I did. I went home at 9 a.m. I did not say anything about the hair tie. What followed was the quietest kind of bad, not dramatic, not confrontational, just the low, persistent static of something you cannot unknow. I went to work. I processed data sets. I ate lunch at my desk. I came home and fed my cat, a gray tabby named Archie, who has the emotional perceptiveness of a small therapist and knew immediately that something was wrong. Because he sat on my chest that evening and did not move for 2 hours. I texted Marcus the way I always texted Marcus. He responded the way he always responded. Nothing was different. Everything was different. My best friend Lola called on Wednesday. She's known me since college, and she has a finely tuned instrument for when I'm not telling her something. She asked how things were going, and I said fine, and she said Jenna, in the specific tone that means try again. I told her about the hair tie. Lola's response was immediate and practical. Have you asked him? No. Why not? Because if I'm wrong, I've accused him of something. And if I'm right, I stopped. If you're right, you need to know, Lola said. I know, I just need a little more time to, I don't know, think. Jenna, you're a data analyst. You cannot data analyze your way out of having a direct conversation. She was right. She is almost always right, which is one of the most annoying things about her and also one of the reasons I've kept her close for 12 years. Give me a week, I said. She gave me a week. She also made me promise to call her before I did anything, which I agreed to, and which I nearly broke several times. I want to pause here for a second, because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking what Lola said. Just ask him. And you're right. Logically, cleanly, obviously right. But I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a moment where the asking felt more dangerous than the not knowing? Where the question itself felt like it could break something that you weren't ready to have broken? That's where I was. Not because I was weak, because I had something real, and I was terrified of being wrong about it. And I think a lot of people watching this have been in that exact place, holding a question you're not ready to ask because the answer could change everything. If that's you right now, drop a comment. I want to know I'm not the only one who has stood in a bathroom at 1 a.m. holding a glass of water and a completely new version of her life. And subscribe if you haven't, because the phone call that finally broke this open, I did not see it coming. And neither will you. The second week, I paid attention, not in a surveillance way. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because there is a version of what I did that looks like investigation and a version that looks like paranoia, and I was trying very hard to stay on the right side of that line. I did not go through Marcus's phone. I did not follow him. I did not hire anyone or install anything or do any of the things that come from a place of distrust that is already calcified into certainty. What I did was pay attention to the things that were already available to me. The texture of our conversations, the patterns I had been in long enough to know by feel. I noticed, in the second week, 3 things. The first, Marcus had been going to the gym at unusual times. Not dramatically unusual. He'd always been a gym person, 3 or 4 mornings a week, early before work. But twice in the second week, he mentioned going in the evening instead. He'd never done evenings before. He'd always said mornings worked better for him. That evening, workouts disrupted his sleep. When I asked, casually, I thought I sounded casual, he said work had been busy and he'd been missing his morning window. Plausible. Completely plausible. I wrote it down anyway. The second, there was a name I hadn't heard before. He mentioned it once in passing while telling a story about a work project. Kara said the timeline was off, and then moved on without elaborating. He was not a person who typically left names hanging without context. When he talked about work, he was precise about who people were, what role they played, why they mattered to the story. He would say, Dana from procurement, or the site manager, Kevin. He gave people their scaffolding. He did not explain who Kara was, and I did not ask, which was its own kind of information about the state I was in. I was so afraid of seeming like I was looking for something that I stopped being the person I normally was. I wrote Kara down, the third, the wine. I stopped at his apartment on Thursday evening unexpectedly. I'd been nearby, I had a key, I'd texted to say I was coming, and when I opened the refrigerator to get juice, I saw a bottle of white wine on the shelf. A good one, not expensive, but the kind you choose rather than the kind you grab. He typically drank red. He kept a 6-pack of beer and whatever I brought over. A chilled bottle of considered white wine was not part of his usual inventory. I noted it. I said nothing. He arrived home while I was still there, delighted to see me in the genuine, uncomplicated way that had always been one of his best qualities. We ordered dinner. He opened a beer. The wine sat in the fridge, untouched. I looked at it once more when I got a glass of water later in the evening, and then I looked away and talked about something else. 3 small things. None of them, individually, meaning anything definite. Together, forming a shape I couldn't stop looking at from the corner of my eye. I called Lola that night. I told her what I had. Okay, she said. So there's a hair tie, there's a name, there's unusual gym times, and there's wine he didn't mention. Yes, that's either nothing or something. Very helpful, Lola. What do you want me to say? You haven't asked him. I can't tell you which one it is without the conversation. I know. So have the conversation. What if I'm wrong? If you're wrong, you'll know you're wrong and you can stop losing sleep. If you're right, I know what happens if I'm right. A pause. Lola knows when to push and when to wait. This was a wait moment. She let it breathe. I'm scared, I said. It was the first time I had said it out loud. I had been thinking it for 2 weeks. The word scared. Underneath all the analysis and the logical frameworks, the actual feeling I had been trying to data process into something more manageable. I know, she said. I keep thinking, what if I ask and he lies? Then I know he's lying and I don't have proof and everything is worse. Or what if I ask and it's true and I have to actually face it? Or what if I ask and I'm wrong and he looks at me like I'm the problem and maybe I am the problem? Maybe I've been... Jenna. What? You're spiraling. I'm aware. Ask him, she said, for what was by now the 5th or 6th time. Whatever the answer is, it's better than where you are right now. She was right. I knew she was right. I had known since the first time she said it. The knowing and the doing were just still separate things, not yet connected by the courage required to close the gap. Give me until the weekend, I said. She gave me until the weekend, and on Friday night, before I had to find out whether I had that courage, Marcus called me first. He called at 8:15 p.m. on a Friday. I was home with Archie and a bowl of pasta and had been working up to the conversation I'd decided to have the next day. He said, "Can I come over? I need to tell you something." The pasta went cold. He arrived 20 minutes later. He sat down at my kitchen table, not on the couch, the table, which was where we had serious conversations, where we'd talked about moving in together, where I'd told him about my father's health scare last year. He sat at the table and he looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Not guilty, not evasive, something more complicated. He said, "There's something I've been keeping from you and I need to tell you before it becomes a bigger thing than it already is." I said, "Okay." He said, "I've been going to therapy." I looked at him. "I started about 6 weeks ago," he said. "I should have told you earlier. I didn't because, I don't know, it felt private. And then it became a thing I was keeping private, and keeping private felt strange. And I kept meaning to tell you, and it got harder the longer I waited." I was very still at my kitchen table. "Therapy," I said. Yeah. That's what you've been... I stopped. The evenings. The gym wasn't... I moved the gym to mornings when therapy was on Tuesday evenings. I didn't want to explain why my schedule was changing. I thought about the white wine in his refrigerator. Why wine you don't usually buy? He blinked. What? There was a bottle of white wine in your fridge last Thursday. You don't drink white wine. He processed this. My therapist, she mentioned a technique. Writing down what you're feeling and then doing something small that's, I don't know, intentional. Something you choose. I was trying things. He paused. I bought the wine because I thought I might actually sit down and drink a glass and just be quiet for a bit. I didn't drink it. It's still there. I sat with this for a moment. Marcus, I said, there was a purple hair tie on your bathroom counter. He stared at me, completely blank, the stare of a person encountering information they genuinely cannot place. A what? 3 weeks ago, when I stayed over. I got up for water at 1 a.m. and there was a purple hair tie on your bathroom counter. It wasn't mine. He looked at the ceiling. I watched him actually think. And then something crossed his face. Recognition, faint and arriving slowly. The cleaning service, he said. I used them again, about a month ago. There was a thing at work and I was exhausted and I booked them last minute. One visit, I forgot to tell you. One visit. About a month ago, maybe 5 weeks. He was looking at me steadily. Jenna, is that what's been wrong? For 3 weeks, you've been... I didn't know what to think. You could have asked me. I know. We looked at each other, across the kitchen table for a moment. I should have asked you, I said. I should have told you about the therapy. Yes, I said. You really should have. This is the part of the story that I didn't understand until I was sitting across from Marcus at my kitchen table at 8:45 on a Friday night, watching him look at me with the expression of someone who has just realized how much weight the other person has been carrying alone. The purple hair tie was not evidence of betrayal. It was a hair tie left by a cleaner during a visit Marcus hadn't mentioned. It meant nothing about what I had been afraid it meant, but the 3 weeks meant something. I had spent 3 weeks circling a direct question because I was afraid of the answer. I had watched and logged and analyzed and consulted my best friend and lost sleep and let Archie sit on my chest and avoided the one thing that would have resolved it immediately. I had, in my own carefully constructed way, done exactly what Marcus had done with his therapy. Kept something private because naming it felt dangerous, let the silence grow into a shape of its own. We talked for 3 hours that night, not about the hair tie, about the pattern. Marcus told me about the therapy. He told me he had started going because of something his mother had said to him at Easter. A passing remark about his father, about the way the men in their family went silent instead of talking. That had landed somewhere deep and wouldn't leave. He told me he had been working on something in himself that he hadn't known how to explain while he was still in the middle of it. He told me he was sorry for not telling me sooner, and that sorry wasn't complete without a reason, and the reason was fear. The specific fear of being seen mid-process, unfinished, working on something he hadn't fixed yet. I told him about the 3 weeks. I told him all of it. The 1 a.m. bathroom, the notebook I had kept in my head, the evenings I had spent constructing alternative explanations, the conversation with Lola, the data analyst approach I had applied to the question of whether my boyfriend was lying to me. I told him without softening it because he deserved the full version. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. You kept a mental notebook, he said. I'm a data analyst. You data analyzed whether I was cheating on you. I preferred to think of it as collecting information before drawing conclusions. He laughed. I laughed. It was the first time in 3 weeks that something had genuinely made me laugh, and it felt like something releasing in my ribcage that I hadn't realized had been clenched. We're both bad at this, he said. Apparently. We should probably both be in therapy. I looked at him. Is that an offer to recommend yours? She's very good. I'm going to tell you what this story is actually about, because I think the hair tie is the least interesting part. In 2 years, and 3 months with someone I trusted, I had not built a habit of asking directly when something felt wrong. I had built, instead, a habit of analysis, of waiting for more data, of constructing logical frameworks around the things that scared me, because looking at the thing directly felt more dangerous than looking at the data around it. And Marcus had not built the habit of showing me himself mid-process. Himself in the middle of something, unresolved, uncertain. He had shown me the finished version, the organized apartment, the meticulous bookshelves, the careful, thoughtful responses. He had not shown me the version that was sitting in a therapist's office on Tuesday evenings, learning how to be less afraid of being seen. We had been, both of us, managing ourselves for each other instead of just being ourselves with each other. It had looked like trust because nothing had broken. But the first real anomaly, one purple hair tie on a bathroom counter, had cracked the whole thing open, because the foundation was presentation rather than transparency. I think this is more common than anyone admits out loud. I think a lot of relationships look solid from the outside and function smoothly day to day, and are, underneath the smoothness, two people being their best curated selves for each other rather than their actual ones. The finished version rather than the in-progress version. The organized apartment rather than the Tuesday evening therapy session. The data analyst who has everything under control rather than the woman lying awake at 3 a.m. running nightmare scenarios because she can't bring herself to ask one direct question. We perform competence for the people we love. We perform okayness. And the performance works most of the time until something small slides into the gap between the performance and the reality. And suddenly the gap is visible in a way it wasn't before. The hair tie was a gap revealer, not a betrayal, a door. Marcus and I started something different after that Friday night. He kept going to therapy. I started going too. Not to the same therapist, my own, a woman named Dr. Sayers, who has the unsettling gift of asking the one question you were hoping she wouldn't think of. Within our first 3 sessions, she had identified with the calm precision of someone who has heard 1,000 versions of the same story, that I had a deep-seated belief that asking for reassurance was a form of weakness, that I would rather construct elaborate internal explanations for things than risk looking uncertain to someone I loved. "Where did that come from?" she asked. I thought about it for the rest of that day and most of the next. Marcus and I also started a weekly check-in, just the two of us, no agenda, nowhere to be. We talked about what was hard that week, about what we were thinking about the small things that didn't seem important enough to mention but that accumulated quietly when left, unmentioned. We talked about the things that were going well, which turned out to be just as important, maybe more. We had been so well trained to manage problems that we had forgotten to acknowledge the parts that weren't problems at all. It was awkward, for months. We said the wrong things and overcorrected and sometimes sat in the silence that lives at the center of difficult conversations and didn't know how to fill it. We learned eventually that the silence was also okay. That being in it together was sometimes the point. Dr. Sayers asked me once, about 4 months in, what I thought would have happened if I had just asked Marcus about the hair tie that first morning. "We would have had the conversation sooner," I said. "And would that have been worse?" I thought about 3 weeks of insomnia and cold pasta, and Archie sitting on my chest. "No," I said. "It would have been better." "So next time," she said, "what will you do differently?" She already knew the answer. She just wanted me to say it out loud. "Ask," I said. "I'll just ask." 8 months after the hair tie, Marcus asked me to move in with him. I said yes. I am writing this from the apartment we now share, which has a bathroom counter that holds considerably more than 4 items and a refrigerator that currently contains 2 bottles of wine. one red, one white, both intentional and both discussed, and a gray tabby cat who has colonized the window seat with the absolute authority of a creature who has never questioned his right to any space he decides to occupy. The hair tie is gone. I never found out which cleaner left it. I find, genuinely, that I don't need to know. It was never really about the hair tie. It was about what I was willing to ask and what I was willing to hear and whether I trusted the thing we'd built enough to put a real question to it. I did. It held. That's the whole story. I want to say one last thing to you before you go. I almost stayed in bed. That night, I almost didn't get up for water. And if I hadn't, I would have gone home the next morning and kissed Marcus goodbye and driven to work and continued in a relationship that was close, but not close enough, and never understood why there was always a small, unnameable gap between what we had and what I thought we could have. The hair tie cracked something open. The fear that followed it cracked something open more. The conversation we finally had, the full, uncomfortable, nobody looks great version of it, was the thing that let us actually see each other. Sometimes the small things are not evidence of the worst thing. Sometimes they're just a door. You have to be willing to open it and see what's on the other side. That's all I've got. Thank you for being here to the end. If this landed for you, if you've ever convinced yourself you had more information than you actually did, or less courage than the moment required, leave me a comment. Tell me what you did. With it, I'll be reading. If you want more, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.